Yours.
Thank you. It's 7:03, and I'll call the meeting to order. Given the fact that I'm self-isolating at home and there's a group of you sitting in council chambers, I think it makes a lot more sense for someone to chair the meeting there, and I'd like to recommend we pass the chair to Councillor Westwell.
Thank you. I had one more dial just to make sure that the volume was now not too loud. Hopefully everybody's hearing me.
Yep.
I just realized I'm missing my backer. What would I do without the cheat sheet? Okay, with that, we already called the meeting to order. Not sure if I missed that while I was jumping over there. Okay. With that, we have no delegations on the agenda for this evening. Any declarations of financial interest? Seeing none. You all have a copy of the agenda. Can I have somebody move the approval of the agenda? Councillor Cox?
I move that the agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you. And seconded? Brevet? Any additions, changes, corrections? Administration?
Thank you. We've received a request from the Fort Smith Housing Authority for an appointment to a seat on the Authority Board of Directors. Council willing, I would like it added as item 9E. Documentation is on your desk.
Councillor Cox and Councillor Crivette is amenable. Thank you. Anything further? Hearing none. All those in favor of the agenda as amended? Carried. Thank you.
Favor.
Favor. Oh, right. Sorry. I'll remember to try to ask the far side. Included in your packages is a copy of the minutes from our meeting from November 3rd. These were adopted at our council meeting on November 17th. So unless there's any questions from council, Councillor Crivette.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just three quick questions. Just with regards to the delegation that was made on during the corporate services meeting. What action are we looking at to move forward with the request from the Education Authority for the three-way stops on McDougall near the school? And then I had two other items.
Sorry, so that was just from the minutes. Are you looking for something from council or corporate services right now as to what we're doing, or just to clarify what your request is?
Yeah, just wondering, what is the next step for this to move forward?
Okay. That sounds like almost an item for our municipal services. If you wanted to recommend an item for the agenda for municipal services for discussion, that makes sense.
Okay, so long as it doesn't just end up delegation comes and nothing happens. It just wanted to follow up since it was in the minutes of the corporate services minutes.
Fair enough.
And then the only other item I had is in relations to item 8 under other business. Previously, we had agreed that during when the quarter variances were brought forward, that there would also be a motions register as part of that process. And I was just wondering if during the next cycle we could get an update on the motion register.
Okay. Administration, if you want to answer that. Yeah.
Certainly, I was unclear. I know council went back and forth. There had been some discussion that council could just request the information as and when. And I'm not sure, did we get a motion? I could certainly check the motion registries. It's no problem to attach the motion registry to the variance. And I can bring that to the fourth quarter variance, no problem. And I'll go through the motion registry to see if there was actual motion of council asking for that. because I know that council wasn't necessarily 100% on that, how they wanted to receive that information.
I cannot recall myself. I remember either being either discussion if it was to be quarterly or if it was to be reviewed at council's behest or annual review. I honestly can't recall where that settled on either. So, anything further? No, council. With nothing further, also included in your packages, we have the visions and values and strategic plan documents. I'm not aware of any updates or changes to these for discussion for this evening. So unless there's some question from council, we'll move along into the governance. So with that, under council governance, council priorities, we have our priorities for review. The bylaw review committee, there is minutes included in the package, and looking for an update from the bylaw review committee. Councilor Gravett.
Okay, I won't go over the multiple pages of minutes. Again, like to thank the Ms. Reid for her diligence in recording our conversations and things. Okay, basically during the meeting we discussed revisions to bylaw 874, which is to deal with the advisory boards. Just trying to move these forward so that they can be amended to include the name changes to the various boards. Also, we very brief discussion regarding the composition of the boards, and it was agreed that they should remain the same. Looking at putting wording in to have the boards meet on an as and when basis, rather than right now the bylaw stipulates that they should meet on a monthly basis. And there's been some issue with quorum with some of the boards, so it's thought the boards should be empowered to decide more of when they should meet or at the direction of council for specific item issues. And also administration is working on finalizing the wording for the Child Care Advisory Board. We talked briefly about bylaw 878, which is a road assumption bylaw, and the policy regarding takeover. It will be coming forward to council. It's primarily housekeeping, basically repealing the policy as it's dealt with in the bylaw, and to add a provision to allow council to take on the discretion of assuming roads that may not be fully up to standards. We also discussed the policy with regards to the naming of street buildings and parks. This was sort of brought on by a request by the mayor in regards to an unnamed street, the process of trying to get the street named. And there was reference to the issue that there was a bylaw actually in place to name the streets in the West Grove subdivision. And also tied into this is the issue of a request pending from the Métis for the renaming of McDougall Road, which is a work in progress. And part of it is there's really no current bylaw saying that we need a bylaw, or there's no current bylaw dealing with naming of roads, buildings, and parks. It's just a policy. So we've asked administration to follow up to determine if there will actually, whether there's an actual need for a bylaw, or whether this can be dealt with by town policy or other means. And then the last thing discussed about working on finalizing the council procedures and conduct and priorities bylaw. And that's it. Thank you.
Any questions from council? Realize I had some questions that I'm now chairing, but if it don't mind to entertain, I had a couple of questions. Just there was a fair bit of reference to the EDAB meeting going rather poorly. I guess I just was wondering if what was the cause of such I don't normally read minutes that refer to a bad advisory board meeting going poorly. So I guess I was just wondering if it's possible to get some sort of indication. Is this just around the marketing video that was done and was received poorly? I guess is there any further information? I take from what I understand, obviously the marketing video was presented by the EDO and it was received poorly. Sorry, that's just for clarification, I guess.
The actual video was well received. The issue was around who the target market was. And there was some lengthy discussion about the town producing a video with no specific target market identified in any strategy or process. And I think what's been missed is there was an opportunity to work with Parks Canada to develop some promotional material for the town. And I think it was just the opportunity was taken on, and I think it produced a video that actually is quite well done. There was just concerns, well, who's the target market? Well, I did point out to the attendees at the meeting that we're in the process under the new strategic marketing process that will be identified, but opportunities need to be jumped on when they present themselves. And that was a great opportunity. And then the only others where it went a little bit sideways was regarding the actual awarding of the contract with regards to the strategic marketing thing. They were wondering, well, why didn't it go to a local business? And I think
So in the weeds.
Yeah.
Okay. It's going to be as a challenge. My only question is, does this present itself as a challenge by making the advisory board into the economic development advisory board, as it opens itself up to a lot more opinion and positioning when you have a title of economic development, as everyone has a lot of axes to grind and a lot of departments to grind those axes and individuals. So it's interesting challenges. So I hope there's a lot of conversation came out of that. So, and potential redirection and changes to the way meetings are held. And it seemed like a lot of material and recommendations and discussion, and the mayor supporting as and when meetings and everything. It sounds like a lot potentially might have changed due to that interaction. I just wanted to clarify if that was feeding that or if that's just a auxiliary.
I think that what we're seeing is sort of, it's symptomatic in that the advisory boards are there to advise council, right? When council has a question and they need community input, the role of the advisory board is to get together and talk and bring the community's vision to something to better inform and educate the council on issues they're struggling with. When council isn't engaging the advisory boards on anything, we haven't asked really for anything from the Economic Development Advisory Board. What do the boards do? Do they just get together and meet and spend the lunch looking for things to do? And so this is, we basically said, we sort of saw that situation where there was no real request from council for the board. And so the board started operating in more of an oversight role. Why did the town do this way? Why did the town do this that way? Which is not really the role of an advisory board. There is a need, as always, for oversight, but that wasn't the request of the board. And so if we're not fully engaging the boards, what is the need for them to meet on a monthly basis? And I think perhaps it's more apparent with the Economic Development Advisory Board, because we now have an economic development officer. So a lot of the role performed by that board is now performed by staff. And so, but again, we see the same thing with our Sustainable Development Advisory Board has struggled to make quorum in the past 3 months. I think they've had one meeting in the past 4 months. So again, in this case, there is direction, but perhaps not member engagement in the requests. And so if they're not engaged in what's being asked of them, perhaps attending the advisory board meetings is not high on their to-do list. And so perhaps if we can make these meetings more pertinent, more special, and have them as and when. The other thing with an as and when meeting is that they're not necessarily tied to lunch times. One of the problems we've seen with the Economic Development Advisory Board and Sustainable Development Advisory Board is that we can't attract private sector individuals to participate in these boards. We can't get businesses on our Economic Development Board. We struggle to get businesses on our Sustainable Development Advisory Board because they're busy making money. So if we can have perhaps less frequent meetings with more flexible times and dates focused on specific issues, we might have better engagement and more productive meetings from our advisory boards. And so that was where sort of this discussion was not in reaction to perhaps an unproductive advisory board meeting, but it was responsive to trying to be responsive to what we're seeing as the root causes there.
Thank you. That was all and some of the questions I had. So thank you. With that, that brings us to the Communications Committee, who has 2 meetings that they had, if they wish to present.
Thank you. Yep, we did have 2 meetings. The first was the meeting on November 11th. That was the day that the COVID cases for Fort Smith were announced. So Communications Committee met to discuss messaging from Mayor and Council surrounding that news. And then our regular meeting of the Communications Committee was on November 24th. So last week's meeting with the Communications Committee, a couple of key points that came out of that. We're going to continue doing our brown bag lunches, but we are going to try them over Zoom, at least for the month of December, to see if we can get any more engagement. We have struggled with getting more than one person attending our in-person brown bag lunches at the arena, in the arena foyer on Wednesdays at lunch, following the regular meeting of council. So we are going to attempt that this month on, again, on the Wednesday following the regular meeting of council, but by Zoom. And then another item to bring to your attention, the December newsletter and the topics that will appear in the December newsletter were discussed last week. We expect it to be published and distributed the 3rd week of December. And in addition to that, administration is also preparing a budget document for distribution as a separate entity for the 2021 budget. And then finally, I'll just revisit our discussion from our October meeting about video clips from counselors. We haven't had any uptake from anyone to do a quick 30-second video clip to share on social media. However, I am hoping that with the Christmas season, it may be an opportunity, the opportunity may present itself for some fun and straightforward opportunities to do video clips. And that is all, unless anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Questions for Jessica or Councillor Cox? All right, thank you very much. Post-Secondary Education Committee has a copy of the minutes in the package as well. I'm not sure if anyone wants to speak to that. Is that Councillor or Deputy Mayor Smith or Councillor Cravette? Yeah.
Okay, I apologize. I don't have any notes to go from. The minutes are presented in the package. And basically, the main thing that we discussed during this particular meeting was the idea of the town of Fort Smith hosting some type of a forum with respect to engaging the broader NWT public in the transformation of the college process. We've seen several documents come out of the bureaucracy in Yellowknife, and it seems to be viewed by the committee that there's a preordained vision of what the Polytech should look like. They've indicated through their documents that they've got some primary streams of learning, basically trades, business programming, and social services programming, and nothing really unique to the north that would be addressing some of the critical areas that are out there. We're thinking like things such as Indigenous governance, self-governance, and areas like that. So we're looking at the possibility of hosting or co-hosting with some other parties, some type of online, basically, we're referring to it as a TED Talk format. And we're sort of trying to narrow down something that would be very engaging to the broader public. And we're thinking that possibly focusing on why the college or the Polytech doesn't seem to see Indigenous governance as a priority area for them to work on.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Courette? Okay, thank you. Moving right along in the agenda, I believe that brings us to, well, actually, we didn't have anything on for Fire Abatement Daycare, Community Recreation Center, or Truth Reconciliation Commission, which brings us right to the Director's Report. Unless you want, Administration, did you have? If you would like to, are able to provide an update, please.
Certainly. Update on fire abatement. So I think the work around Tamarack Trailer Court and West Grove subdivision is substantively complete. I know that I think the Métis want all the equipment off the old soccer pitch so they can put a put an outdoor rink there. I don't know if it's gone or not yet. Okay, so what I'll do is I don't have an answer for that, but I'll talk to people who do and try and get back to you on that. We are still waiting for feedback. I know the mayor was going to talk to Department of Lands about potentially expediting access to properties on the other side of the highway so that the fire break along the border could be completed with funds that are available from ENR in conjunction with town funds. I haven't heard an update on that. We've also been working with Productive Services to talk about some expansion of a level of service from the fire department into wildland interface protection, also into low angle rope rescue because of the slopes around here, potentially ice rescue. So we don't know what that costs yet, but we're going to use our ground ambulance highway rescue money for 2021 to start doing the training so that we can get some skills in-house to better understand what those costs would be for ongoing training and equipment maintenance. And part of that would be, it was specific to fire abatement. If we talk about doing joint training with GNWT fire crews and learning how to operate the equipment that we might need to purchase to better support the GNWT in fighting fires at the urban interface. Okay, with daycare, so the daycare is still proceeding both from a design point and an operational point. I think we have 4 or 5 kids right now. So since we are not at capacity, we are looking at 2 things. One is if it wasn't out today, it'll be out tomorrow, will be the drop-in program. So half-day and one-day drop-ins will be available to parents who just need daycare for a day. to do something. Perhaps they want to drop their child off just for an afternoon or a morning so they can go and use other town facilities like the pool, like the gym, whatever. So that's coming out right away. The way the daycare works is the number of kids we can have are indexed to the number of staff we have. And so we can have either up to 8 or up to 16 toddlers, depending on staff, or we can have up to 6 infants. And so right now we are looking at starting the purchase of equipment that if we're never going to top our toddlers off or exceed 8 with toddlers, that the other staff will be put towards up to 6 infants, because we're seeing a call for infants right now. We wanted to ease our way into infants because there's a higher standard of care with infants. But we're going to start working towards infants. I can't give a timeline on it right now, but by the time we're done, you're going to have a facility that can handle up to 20 after-school care children, and either 8 or 16 toddlers and 6 infants, depending on how we staff and allocate our resources on a weekly or up to half-day, full-day drop-in basis.
So there's an interesting as well that recently the, though unannounced and no details provided, federal budget has indicated that there will be a federally funded childcare program nationwide in the next budget that's presented. So I'm interested to see how that folds into what we might be preparing for. So.
Yes, I think the way we've set up our daycare, and I've said this before, hopefully serves as sort of a good foundation, at least in the north, where we pay a living wage. We don't rely on a lot of volunteerism or unpaid. The actual costs are reflected exactly in what parents pay. And so we would, depending on how the money comes out, subsidize the parents, right? Parents with higher need, subsidize them more. And we'll continue to provide services at a break even as the town. Moving on to Community Recreation Center, we have completed schematic design and design development for the basement. It's had the public review, user group review was very well received, and of course it was presented to council. So the basement renovations are full speed ahead. Of course, they'd been occurring already with some demolitions and with slabs getting poured. Further, we've completed our schematic reviews of the rest of the facilities, and so we're just waiting for slightly updated drawings as well as pricing information for any requests that were beyond the initial scope that was bid on. And the plan had been to get this information for the December cycle. We'll see how that goes. But the first step is once we have this information back, we'll bring it back to council with the pricing information, and then public and user group review and input to make sure we heard them and we got it right. At which point it's going to be sign off and just working with the contractor to go into the more details, similar to what we did with the basement, the finish approvals. And whatnot. And also we have to start buying furniture as well. ULC next week a briefing note requesting approvals to purchase equipment for Peach gyms. The equipment will cost over $50,000. It's beyond my signing authority, so it will be going to council for approval. The gymnasium equipment, or the Peach gym equipment, the fitness room equipment is by far going to be the most expensive. Beyond that, we're going to be just looking at tables and chairs and IT type stuff, televisions and whatnot. So that's coming to council as well. And the other thing to, of course, work out with them is the phasing of the final construction. Once the basement is built, that gives them the opportunity to move Pete's gym down to the basement, start working in the library. There is a requirement for them to do some main floor work as they have to reinforce the steel for the library prior to moving the stacks in. So there's a couple of moving pieces there that we have to juggle our way through as the project unfolds.
Thank you very much. And lastly, there's any updates for Truth Reconciliation Commission?
No, I would suggest this is a file that doesn't move that quickly. And also this is a file where in a lot of cases, I'd be looking for more council direction on. The one thing that we've looked at taking the lead with administratively was the rollout of the training, the sensitivity and awareness training. And as I stated previously, we have been given access to the GNWT's suite of training, online training. We just have yet to roll it out to staff.
Yeah, I think it's noteworthy administration's contribution to both the declaration and the advancement of the training program for other municipalities is like accolade worthy as its own. So, unfortunately, this brings us to the director's report, which means you're back on the floor.
And I have a sick director. So not a lot to, I don't have an update on the comings and goings. It's again, year-end preparation, getting the books in order for year-end. And that's what they've been working on. We have, a competition. One of our employees that was off on extended leave without pay has said she won't be returning. If any of you remember Lisa, her mother finally passed away and she's chosen to stay in Good Hope with her family. So we will be staffing for that position to give O'Brien his full complement of staff again. And the reports are before council.
Thank you. You have the accounts paid list. If there's any questions for administration with the director away this evening or not. Not seeing any at the moment, as well as the correspondence list. If there's any questions or updates or requests for information. The support letter from October 30th. I'm not sure if I just don't recall seeing that come through or not. Or it just mentions it was to the mayor's office. I'm not sure if that's something that was actioned. Is anybody aware if that was a funding proposal? Okay. I can follow up with the mayor. It was sent to all of us? Okay. Oh.
Sometimes the requests come direct to the mayor and not mayor and council, and that's how we distribute correspondence. So if it's to the town, it comes to me. If it's to mayor and council, it goes to everybody. If it just goes to the mayor, just addressed to the mayor, it goes to the mayor. And typically letters of support we don't bring before council. They go just direct to the mayor, and she uses the authority of her position to give them. So Ms. Reed advises that that letter of support was sent by the mayor.
Thank you. That's actually all I was wondering. Councillor Cox?
I'm not sure if administration can provide an update on, just looking at the correspondence list, the mayor was CC'd on a letter from Smith's Landing to the COVID-19 Secretariat about the checkpoint at the border and the Winter Road. I was just wondering if there's an update on the status of the Winter Road and the decision surrounding it.
Thank you. I'm not sure if administration will be able to provide any.
No, I've heard nothing since council. I know the mayor does attend regular meetings through NWTAC with the premier, but I'm not privy to what occurs in those meetings, so I don't know if it was spoken of there.
Thank you. Was that a hiccup or a glitch in the... Okay, so moving right along as well, we have the copy of the license report. If there's any questions for administration in regards to the licensing report. Seeing none. That brings us to bylaw policy review and development. Which we do not have anything under this evening because everything is under other business, I believe. 8A, appointment of a acting SAO. Speak to this first, administration.
Thank you. Ms. White is back as of Monday. She has standing acting designation from council. However, she is not so soon back as she's taking some time off at Christmas, but you can't begrudge a person a vacation at Christmas. Well, you can, but it won't do you any good. So she will be away from the 21st to the 29th of December. And we're asking that Paul Kaiser, Director of Municipal Services, act as SAO for that period of time from the 21st to the 29th of December inclusive.
Even Donny days.
I move that Paul Kaiser be appointed acting SAO for the period of December 21st to December 29th.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Campbell. A discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Oh, sorry, on the far end.
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor as well.
Thank you. The COVID-19 update, administration.
Thank you. So, as we are aware, COVID is showing no signs of letting up. Daily cases continue to increase. It is on a logarithmic trajectory with no sign of letting up. It's well beyond twice as many daily cases as we were at the height of the pandemic. We've been fortunate in the NWT. Those in Nunavut, if you've been watching the news, have not been as fortunate. Pending a community level outbreak, though, I think that the chief public health officer is going to be hesitant to step back to the phase 1 of emerging wisely, where businesses were locked down, rec facilities were locked down. So there is an effort to try and keep the doors open. So in acknowledgement of that, but also in awareness of the severity of the pandemic down south, we're cranking up messaging around masks. And so our recreation facilities, because they are open at behest of the chief public health officer, have already had a strong mask policy. We haven't had that at town hall, but we have created one. So there are 3 councillors in the room currently who are in violation of the town mask policy. So I would just note that the policy in town hall now is that everyone in the building is required to wear a mask, whether they're staff or visitors, or even the illustrious elected. Remember, you wear the mask for everyone else's safety, not for your own, right? We have done some reorganization in town hall as well to reduce the amount of people crossing paths as they move. We've moved everyone out of the center core, with the exception of the receptionist. Everyone's in an office now. That means we have made the mayor work from home from here on in. So her office is now being used by the executive secretary, and even Ms. Seals, who'd been working from the basement, the EDO, will be working from home after Christmas. And so the office is well socially distanced. And when we put out our notification to all residents to make sure that they wear a mask when they come to town hall, we also threw the challenge down to other local businesses. There's nothing stopping any business from putting its own special mask policy where, you know, you have to wear a mask to enter Kazers, or you have to wear a mask to enter Home Hardware. That is at the behest of the shop owners. And so we encourage that level of diligence. I don't see the municipality ever mandating it. That's kind of a stretch of municipal authority. It could be something that comes down at a territorial level. But until then, I mean, just common sense is wear the mask, stay safe. And so we're trying to lead by example as we move ahead with that. Beyond that, from business continuity, the town's doing fine. The private sector, we've seen no stresses on materials, supplies, whatnot into the community. And then otherwise, we have moved all our meetings outside of the council meetings and the standing committee meetings to Zoom. So our advisory boards had always been Zoom meetings because we couldn't guarantee keeping them below 10 people. But our other subcommittees, bylaw review, communications, and post-secondary education have all been moved to Zoom. And the request to council is do you want to move standing committee and council meetings to Zoom as well? I know that when we came out of the pandemic in the spring, people were happy to be face-to-face again. We were tired of being holed up in your house all winter. You wanted to look people in the eye. And I think we all got a little complacent over the summer. And that's fine, you know, but I think what we're seeing with what's happening down south, we gotta tighten our boots and decide if we want to keep meeting publicly or not. We are within the chief public health officer regulations to keep on meeting public. There's nothing to stop us, but just because we can, it is, you know, it doesn't mean we have to. And I think that people might be more willing to attend Zoom meetings after being face to face all summer. And, with how scary the situation looks south of the territorial border, people might be happy to go back to meeting from the comforts of their living room again. But I'll leave that one to council. That's not something, administratively we're going to push, but we will just ask adherence to the mask policy from here on in.
It's my mistake for complacency here. I gotten used to having my mask with me and applying it in within 6 feet situation. That's not necessarily all the time. So, but I do believe there was a sign on the door that I objectively didn't do a good enough job of reading. Okay, with that, we're on to other business, which case the 2021 O&M budget has a briefing note.
Nobody hears me.
Sorry, what was that?
Councillor Westwell, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, I'd like to ask a question if it's okay.
Please.
In regards to COVID-19, the town taking water samples. Has anybody? How are the water sample things going? And has there ever been a case of COVID found in the water sample?
Interesting. I'm not sure. I think that we can ask administration if that's information they have available, but I think that might be a little on left field for.
I have no problem saying I don't know. And I don't know. We're not actually taking the water samples. We installed the machine for our for the GNWT, but it's actually the GNWT that are taking the samples, and we haven't heard anything back from them one way or another as to what they're seeing.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Any further questions before we move along to other business? All right, hearing none. Administration, the 2021 budget documents are included in the package. If there's additional direction you're looking for this evening.
Certainly, I provide additional information. So the way I've taken this briefing note is I've kept the same briefing note and updated it. So in the red is the updates from our last meeting. In the blue is the latest updates, most of which was spoken about at our last meeting because some new information had come through between when I wrote the last briefing note and when we met. So the first section in blue talks about we weren't seeing the forced growth in the salaries and wages we expected, predominantly because we were not seeing the step increases we expected it because most of our staff were maxed out at step 6 or brand new hires at step 1. So that's a great benefit to us, but also note that having lots of hardworking staff at step 6 means that we have lots of long-serving staff that have been doing hard work for a long period of time, and we're starting to see lots of short-term and long-term disabilities show up as a result, and we're not quite certain how to quantify that yet. Moving on to the next page, I talked about one of the other anticipated costs was the fact that we didn't receive the $80,000 that we'd budgeted for from the GNWT for the ALGAP program. I note that was offset because the incumbent into the position actually took 5 months of parental leave, which certainly eased, because when they're on parental leave, they're not being paid from salaries and wages, so that eased the impact on the budget there for 2020. One of the other things you've seen is that one of the ways we budget is through allocations, which is where, for example, a certain percentage of a corporate services clerk's salary is allocated to the utility budget because they do a good percentage of their work processing water bills. And so that takes the pressure, even though that person will see an increase in salary every year, some of that will get moved over to the utility budget. And you see that because most of the impact, the deficits that do show up are in utility and environmental, which I'll talk about later. Further, I mentioned that when we incorporated after-school care into the overall childcare department. After school care had previously run at a deficit. So when we designed the overall childcare department to run at break even, that removed that deficit from the budget. One of the things we're seeing, because we put in a new mechanism to estimate the forced growth on utility costs, because our utility expenses are so big, small changes in how we estimate them can result in a relatively volatile budget. These estimates are based on historical data, so the longer the data stays, the mechanism stays in place, the more it'll level out. And plus, we've had all kinds of strange inputs. 2018 with the Arctic Winter Games threw a flyer into our utility costs. Historical costs for 2020 is throwing a flyer into our utility costs because our facilities weren't getting used nearly as much. We weren't heating the pool all summer, for example. So those things are a little skewed in the budgeting. That's contributed to the volatility. Under revenues, I mentioned the fact that council had the foresight to budget $135,000 operating surplus. Not only did this help cushion the blow of the COVID losses, revenue losses, but it offset any potential deficit we were going to run this year. Next to notes, numbers. Basically analysis, as you recall before, all these pages, all these numbers, analysis of various property tax increase impacts, and some dialogue around the seniors program. And in there, I just I put some information that was given verbally to council previously about if council wished to entertain level of service changes, the costs of, for example, closing a facility for a day. This is the savings you would see. If you close the rec center on a Sunday, you would save $38,500 annually, but you would impact 60 residents per week. Data of the library closing the library on a Saturday and Sunday would save you a little over $12,000 annually. Closing the arena on a Sunday would save you $10,000 annually, but would make a lot of hockey players angry. The next section of the budget it's the level of service section of the budget where I talk about, most of the places where we've seen call for level of services in protective services. I talked earlier under fire abatement about things we were doing to increase level of service for protective services with respect to wildland interface firefighting. In those cases, we're not recommending budget increases for 2021. 2021 is going to be an exploration period for us to try and determine costs more accurately for potential increases in 2022. I make a note here where I basically say there's more to talk about when it comes to bylaw, what council's vision for bylaw is, what are truly the pressures, or what we hearing really what we need to address. And I don't think that we can necessarily talk about allocating budget to address that level of service at this point. The recommendation from me would be to make sure in the capital plan that capital money is put in aside to bring in an expert to work with us, to help us work with council, work with staff, and work with the community to determine sort of what an appropriate bylaw enforcement department looks like for Fort Smith. Is it dog catchers? Is it lots of traffic? Is it 2 people? Is it 3 people? What kind of equipment are they wearing? What do they look like? How do they interact with residents? To have that dialogue to come up with a picture and then put in place. If council, this study can happen the first half of the year with implementation mid-year. And so if council were just to approve a surplus in the budget at this point, then that surplus could be allocated to bylaw level of service changes once we know what they're going to be through the expenditure of capital funds on a consultant. So finally, I go into near the end of the document, I go into an analysis. We're still fine tuning the document, but I think we're close enough now to start splitting hairs. I think that any kind of mistakes or changes or improvements or revisions to the document are going to be at a smaller margin of error than a lot of just the assumptions we make on overall expense and revenue figures. So at this point, we're showing for 2021 a $62,409 surplus. We do, of course, this is a 3-year rolling budget. We try and give you numbers for the next 2 years too, so council can make decisions and see what the impact is on subsequent years. So you see that by 2022, that turns into an $82,000 deficit. And so that's just due to forced growth because we project our salaries and we project our utility costs forward these following 2 years. So basically you're looking at a differential of 62 and 82. That's $145,000. Right. And then from 20 to 23, the increase is not quite 145. It's a bit smaller. Again, I think that's due to employees aging out and even fewer step increases. So you're talking about, $140,000, $150,000 forced growth number every year. So if you don't want to run into that deficit next year, ensure you approve a surplus that offsets it, so that you're not dealing with the deficit this year, so you're not dealing with the surplus budget next year, sort of is what I'm saying there. But right now you're sitting at a surplus, and so officially there's no need to do any revenue changes, and certainly no level of service reductions to try and manage expenses, unless council wants to put some money in the bank for pending bylaw enforcement level of service changes. Under utilities, it's a $76,547 deficit that grows to $105,956,000 in 2022 and a little over $130,000 in 2023. Most of this increase is due to utilities picking up their share of administrative costs. This is the allocations I talked to you about earlier. What happens is when we added through our reorganization the corporate or the assistant SAO position, a good portion of their salary is allocated to utilities because they're doing human resources management and bylaw and policy development for that department as well. So that's what you see. You see it's 76 and then it grows by 30 and then it grows by a little less than 30. So it's growing by about 30 every year after this year. An analysis of that can be addressed with approximate 6.5% utility rate and levy increase. That's the water charge, the trucked water charge, the sewage pump out. The last increase in these rates were in 2018, and it was a small one. It was a 2.5% increase with a 15% solid waste levy increase. So your water bill includes 3 numbers. It's what you pay for your water, so that's your utility rate and levy. It's your solid waste levy, and then it's a couple of bucks for the service interruption insurance. And it's about a 1/3, 2/3 split. So the utility costs are twice as much as the solid waste levy. So the reason I tell you that is in 2018, there's a 2.5% increase in utility rates, which the utility rates are the big number. And while there's a 15% solid waste levy increase, it's the smaller of the numbers on your bill. So the impact wasn't as great, even with that big percentage. So I would suggest that, a small 6.5% water fee increase would address that deficit. Under environmental, again, a $23,465,000 deficit, increasing by $5,000 in 2022 and another $5,000 in 2023. It is again due to allocations from the general budget, and it can be addressed simply a slight increase in the solid waste levy, which is recommended here. And so that is the budget. You have a surplus in your general, and it's whether council wishes to do the tax increase to add to that surplus, and then slight utility and environmental deficits, which can be addressed with slight fee increases in those 2 areas.
Thank you very much. We'll go around the room to see, starting with Councillor Courvette.
Yeah, just on that last bit, I just did a quick calculation here. So for under the assumption that the average residential bill is $70 a month for utilities and the environmental thing, we're talking about a $4.65 increase on the monthly bill. So I don't think it's terribly onerous. Multiply that by 12, so about $50 a year to cover the deficits under those two items. Now, is there anything in the bylaws and policies regarding these, the utility and the environmental, that they are to be a break-even requirement?
Thank you. Not with environmental. We track environmental for a reason, not a legislated reason, just because of the asset associated with the environmental budget. With the environmental budget, it's tied to the landfill. And unlike most of our infrastructure, when it reaches the end of its life, we can walk away from a town hall or walk away from an arena. In the case of the environmental, the landfill, when it's at the end of its life, it still has a substantive liability as a contaminated site. And so that's why we track those numbers separately, is to make sure that any revenues associated with environmental go back to dealing with that that liability. In case of utilities, we are required by legislation to break even. We cannot profit from the sale of water to residents. And so we do not break even on the cost of the water, because realize that that what we charge for water, while it breaks even on our operating costs don't include the amortization and capitalization of all the assets associated. So once we factor that in, we could actually be charging a considerable amount more than we do.
Thank you. Did you have anything further?
Just one final comment. I'd be in favor of us targeting a tax revenue goal of about very similar to last year, which was $135,000, of which we already have 62 showing in the surplus. So if for our next meeting, if administration could provide us what that would work out to an actual tax percentage increase or mill rate increase, would be appreciated. Thank you.
Let's just clarify then. So you're in favor of the proposed changes to fees and supportive of the revenue, property tax revenue increases required close to the 4% proposed there, which is listing 142,000. But if it was at 4%, of revenue increased. Councillor Campbell.
Okay, on this budget here, we go back, when we approved our reorganization, we were on the assumption we were going to get $80,000 from LGAP. So we were told that we're going to get the money. Now we reorganized and we never got the money. Can we go backward, or is it possible? I don't know. Like, that's $80,000 that's spent where we don't have the money. And we're assumed that we're getting the money from the LGAP.
To clarify, do you mean like change our organizational structure again?
Put it back to where it was.
I believe, and again, I can let administration to comment on this one, but I believe that the short funds themselves ended up being covered by like vacancies and other administrative management, but I'm not sure I could comment. Administration may be able to provide more comment, but.
Well, I mean, for 2020, we didn't get the funds that were expected. Fortunately, the hit wasn't as hard as we anticipated in 2020, because the person, first of all, the person was gone for half of the year for all intents and purposes, so 5 months of the year on parental leave. So it didn't hurt us as bad as we thought. or as it could have in 2020. And then it would have been a 2-year program if we'd have received the money, where we would have had to make the decision after 2 years of internally funding the position regardless. And so the way the budget is played out is at this point, the position is internally funded without the LGAP funds. So the decision was going to be before council how to fund that position regardless, because the LGAP money would have run out at the end of 2021 anyways, right? It was only 2 years worth of money, at which point, the dialogue was at the time that we would look to, that would give us 2 years to find the money, to put it internally. As it is, it's found in year 2. If council wishes to revisit the org chart, that is a possibility. If that's the direction of council, we can abolish the position. There was a person hired and taken the job. We would have to, lay them off, I presume, at the direction of council.
But that essentially covers it. Generally, yeah, the org chart is always up for discussion, but it would be something you usually don't do. You don't backsies on usually without too much more consultation. Did you have any other questions?
No, I'd like to revisit it sometime. Thanks.
Fair enough. Councillor Cox?
Specific to the fee increases for the utility and environmental deficits, I also support those fee increases. With regards to carrying a surplus in the general O&M budget, similar to Councillor Couvrette, I would also support a property tax increase similar to last year, although there was some discussion last month about having that 5% weighting increase on institutional properties, which would they would then carry the bulk of the tax increase. It wouldn't be as much of a hit to residential. So I would be interested in exploring that further, but I would like to see the surplus carried, and in that 4%, 142,000 range. Thank you.
Administration?
Thank you. For budget purposes, typically council would just set the revenue expectation, and then at the approval of the mill rate bylaw process, which would occur once budget is approved and we're setting mill rates, so we can have the discussion about how we set the various rates for the various zones, if that works for council.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. In that case, I think Councillor Couvrette specified 135,000, so 135 to 142, as that was the example provided in the figures provided in the briefing note. Thank you.
Councillor Bolio?
I'm not a mathematician, but can I take a little bit of time to look at this a little bit longer to fully understand it?
Certainly. Did you get a copy of your budget from the last meeting as well?
Yeah, I think I
Yeah.
did.
Okay. Certainly. Councillor Pissinger?
I'm just wondering if there's have we heard any word yet if municipalities are going to receive any funding for COVID?
Thank you. We received $235,000. I think it showed up in our bank account last week, and it's no strings attached money. We thank our neighbors to the north at Yellowknife for that, because the initial contribution, the GNWT contribution agreement that GNWT tried to use, had a number of deliverables tied to it. And after going a couple rounds with Yellowknife, the contribution agreement we got has absolutely no strings. It's here you go, thanks for helping out kind of money, which is much appreciated. Having said that, it really doesn't impact our 2021 budgeting process. It's seen as a revenue in 2020. That's when we got it. So it's a bit extra money in the bank, but it's not something we can budget for. It would go straight to reserves. It would, it shows up in general cash, and then after 2 years, it would transfer to reserves.
Thank you. Further questions?
So then the money that's in reserves, we could, as part of a surplus, right? We could use it for other things.
No, we can't use it.
I'm just saying, we're going to raise taxes, we're going to raise some fees and that, and we've received some money. So now we're going to get that much further ahead. Sure, we want to, but like you said, I don't know of any other municipalities raising property taxes and things like that during the pandemic.
I could speak to reserves.
Sure.
We tend to use reserves in Portsmouth as what are called capital reserves, and so their money, we treat them like the capital money we get from the GNWT. It's money for building things, right? But ultimately, reserves are like your savings account. You might put money in your savings account for buying a new boat in 5 years, but if you come upon hard times or you need money, you know what, you can reach into your savings account and use them to pay the power bill if you've got to, and that sort of thing. So we can use our reserves to operate. We try not to, just because without our reserves, we don't have sufficient capital money from other sources, from the GNWT and whatnot, to fix all the things we own. So we try and stay out of our reserves. The only other thing I would note is that moving money over from reserves into the budget it's one-time money, right? So we saw what happened with the $135,000 surplus that we received when council approved the surplus last year. That was additional operating money for that year, but that surplus budget carries over to the next year, and it continues to ease the pressures, future pressures, where if you just pull in money from reserve for 1 year, you can see that property tax increase exists every year, right? So we keep on getting that extra $135,000 every year from property tax. But if you take $135,000 from reserves, you just get it that 1 year you pulled it out, and you don't get it the subsequent years. And so it might seem like the same number of dollars in that year, but you don't actually get the long-standing benefits of increased revenue forever as you would from a revenue increase. So I think probably, the most pertinent part is property taxes in a pandemic. Is that, I understand council's willing, sees the need to almost, last budget, we talked about writing property taxes in a bylaw. So it was almost like a cost of living thing that happened every year. And perhaps it's not the year this year. Because of the pandemic. That's the gut check for council, I suppose, and I'm glad the councillor brought it to the table. I suggest we see the other communities. I think Yellowknife is struggling with the 11.8% property tax increase this year, and they're actively chopping away at their wish list to not have it be there. But I think their end goal is going to be 2 or 3% property tax increase when they're done.
Thank you, Councillor Pfister.
But no, I'm not. I agree. With the what Councillor Couvret and brought forward before about the $5 a year, $50 a year for levies and things like that, and then 140 some thousand for property tax. It's not that. But then Councillor Campbell asked about we didn't receive 80,000 for a position. And now that's in the budget, but where did we find that money in the budget? I'm just trying to come to understand how we get one and not the other,
At the time of
where did we find the 80,000?
I think at the time of the reorganization was actually proposed by administration, it was actually proposed as a zero cost. Because of the shuffling of positions around throughout the organizational structure. And then, of course, the LGAP funding was meant to really subsidize the funds for the assistant SEO's position, but that in general, it was only a short-term component for training of the position, that we would actually still have to be funding that ongoing. But generally, when it was presented, it was operational efficiency gains through the organizational chart changes that would actually help fund a number of the changes that were proposed.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately it's just pluses and minuses, right? The minuses are this $80,000 we didn't get. So that was a minus. Other minuses are the fact that, I talked about increases in salaries across the board. So those are minuses, and they're showing up on one side. But the pluses that showed up on the other side was there was a surplus. We came into this with $135,000 surplus from the previous year. And then other pluses are we're running less of a deficit than we normally would with our after-school care program, because the child care program is set up to break even. And so by the time all the pluses and minuses balance out, we're actually finding ourselves with a bit of a surplus situation. If we were to get that LGAP money, or that LGAP money, or if we were to terminate the position, that would just be another plus. It would add to the surplus at this point.
Just like to mention as chair that we should probably stop talking about terminating positions off unless you're going to actually move into a different conversation of a different meeting. That's certainly not, it's an HR level and not a public meeting sort of level discussion if that keeps coming up. But I do not wish to entertain such a thing. Councillor Bolio, did you actually have anything you wanted to add at this time? No. Deputy Mayor Smith? And I guess you want to go first.
Yeah, thank you. So can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Sorry, it's too loud now. Yellowknife has actually settled on a 4.3% property tax increase for 2021. They whittled it down from just under 12%, as Mr. Morrison. I don't know what the town of Hay River is looking at, but I do know they are looking at spending $18 million on infrastructure. And I think that's something that council has to consider here. We're talking about minimizing cost to residents. We also need to keep in mind that the town is a major economic engine in the community. There's not a lot of GNWT investment going on in the community right now. I think Salt River has some plans in the works, and there's some federal funding around the reserve expansion, but whether or not that comes to fruition in 2021 or not, we're not sure. So we have to keep in mind our role as an economic engine, physicians, employ families, and I think we've got, between the rec center and the remaining water sewer works, we've got $3 or $4 million worth of projects on the books for 2021, I would imagine, roughly. So we have a role to play there as well. In terms of where my thinking is with property tax increases, I've always been supportive of small incremental property tax increases. I don't have a number in mind. The $135,000 is being kind of bandied around. I always prefer to have money in the bank rather than face some unforeseen circumstance, such as an arena fire, where all of a sudden you don't have reserves and cash at hand that you can throw towards a project, because the town was well financially managed when the arena fire came around, and because we did have surpluses in our reserve, we were able to borrow a much smaller amount of money, which has less property tax burden long-term on residents. That's something we need to keep in mind when we budget. Yeah, I'm in favor of an incremental budget. That being said, I'm always cognizant of the fact that property tax increases do not impact residents equitably, or they're unequal in the result. If you live in the P's, you live in the old homes that have a much lower assessment on Pine Crescent, etc., you're going to pay a lot less on a 3.5% property tax increase than if you live in West Grove. I'm always fearful that if we keep increasing property taxes beyond a certain threshold, that becomes a disincentive to development. People building new houses, we want their property tax revenue. We want people to be building. We're seeing growth in that area. We want to encourage that. So I think there's a balancing act there. In favor of a small incremental property tax increase from my standpoint. so that, we have a little bit of money in the bank, potentially transfer surplus to reserves at the end, which will help us with replacement of town hall, property protective services, buildings, whatnot. In terms of the water, sewer, and solid waste levy, I'd actually be in favor of a larger increase. I would be potentially in favor of even a 10% increase if we're forecasting a deficit in the future. If we go for a larger increase now, which means that we, like I say, a 10% rather than a 6%, which means we don't have to look at an increase in 2022, and gives us a little bit of extra money in the bank, which I think is justifiable based on the amortization costs that Mr. Morrison spoke about earlier. If the average resident in the town of Fort Smith is paying $70 a month for utility, 77 is not that big of a difference. I pay $104 a month out at Bell Rock. It's a little bit more expensive to get trucked water and sewer, so that's an $11 a month increase for me. I think there's a balancing act between a modest property tax increase and a reasonable and justifiable water and environmental solid waste levy increase based on forecasted future deficits. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor MacArthur.
Hello there. Start off, I'm dead set against taking money out of our reserves. Those are for new buildings, like Deputy Mayor Smith said. On another note, a 3.5-4% increase in property taxes. I'm fine with that. The other thing, the water and sewage levy, if you rounded that to 10% and 5%, that would look good. Also, I was thinking maybe a 2.5% increase on lottery and medevac, since we did tipping fees this year. I would be fine with that. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And just a reminder that, like with many years, we're talking about a 3 or 4% increase to revenue from taxation, which, after all worked out, actually has in the past worked out to be in the sub 1% increase to taxes for homeowners. And then with the consideration of how we decide to weight it when the mill rate comes along. So we've been rather blessed, I think, to have done actually such low mill rate increases and actual low tax increases, but still managed to increase by addressing revenue as the increase for the organization, and less than the talking about exactly what the tax percentage we will support or not. So with that, I think I'll leave most of my discussion until I'm not chairing. So administration, do you have any final comments?
No. Will council want this document before them next week, or is it good to bring it to council meeting in 2 weeks? What I'm hearing is an approximate $135,000, 3.5-4% property tax revenue increase. I'll bring an analysis of a break-even utility increase and a larger 10% increase, and I'll bring numbers for lottery and medevac increases as well. Just to reference the kind of the economic engine, I may next week be bringing council applications for ICIP, additional federal funding, which will look at it like approximately $5.5 million application to pave all the remaining roads in town. That's Bell Rock, that's Primrose and Carl's Drive, that's Marine Drive, Park Drive, as well as repairs to some existing streets, pave the trail, and as well as 1.5 million for a curb gutter in the downtown core. And then also there'll be a second application for approximately $3 million for the landfill expansion. And this is all money that would most likely be getting put on the ground next year while CRC renovations are happening. We have some unexecuted projects on this year's capital plan, including a budgeted, a funded $3.4 million town hall, new town hall for us, and then there's still the unanswered question around the fire hall and how we address that. So there's lots of capital money that's going to be put on the ground. that pressures our reserves, that also pressures our human resources. And so remember that we're all going to be even busier. The more people we have on staff, the more that's expected of us. And so, yeah, we look to be busy spending money in town, millions and millions and millions of dollars. So, would council like to see this document again next week, or is there enough certainty in the direction we're going that we can bring it for final review at council in 2 weeks?
And from what I've heard so far around the table this evening, I think you've sort of summarized the feeling of council as far as entertaining, and you're going to bring numbers. Is there any disagreement to that? This summarized that fairly well. So at council to present with additional information as we've provided direction this evening.
Fine.
Thank you very much. That moves us past other business A and into other business B, tree lighting road closure. We have a recommendation here. I'm not sure if someone just wants to read this one in. Councillor Campbell.
I move that for public safety reasons, the section of McDougall Road between Simpson Street and Brainerd Street be closed to the public from 3:45 p.m. to 5:15 p.m. on Saturday, December 5th, 2020 for the Christmas tree lighting.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Cox. Discussion? Administration.
December 1st, it's Christmas time. Christmas time. And, you know, contrary to what you may read on Facebook, the town has a lot going on for Christmas, right? We've got, you might have seen the Christmas calendar. It should have mail dropped today. We try and live, we have a message from mayor and council. We have all the town hours. We're keeping our rec center open later than we normally do on Christmas Eve because we're acknowledging that not everybody can get together with family, and so we're giving them other things to do. We have plans for, you know, some sliding parties, working with the arena. There's going to be some subdued hockey events happening. As you've seen, the lights are on up and down the street. Paul Kaiser's crews are working good to get the lights in the trees along McDougall. Jeff has been working hard with the chief public health officer to make sure we can have a COVID Christmas and a Santa Claus parade. So Santa Claus parade got official approval today. So that is going to happen. So the parade route's ready to go, and all the notifications will be going out about that. And we've just about got final touches on the fireworks event for New Year's Eve as well. And the fireworks are being ordered, and the boom squad is ready to go out and set them off. Diane and Jeff have been working with ITI, the great sponsors of their Christmas park at QE Campground. And as you know, the town staff have thrown down the gauntlet with with councillors to see who can decorate better. And so that one will be proceeding until I think opening of that park will be on, I think it's the 13th of December. We've also been working closely with local volunteers about the Santa sleigh. Now, the town is never actually, we don't run the Santa sleigh, so just get that out there, but I will let you know we've always supported it. When it lost its home, because I think where it used to live got condemned, we housed it, we funded things, we pay for gas for the generators, we've bought the sound system for it, we even towed it when they didn't have a vehicle, and I think we'll be towing it again this year on and off. But the volunteers have organized and got together, and there is a new leader, and Santa's going to be out there, and they're going to be washing Santa's costume every night to meet the COVID protocols. But the Santa sleigh is moving ahead, so we appreciate all the interest from the community and all the volunteers that stepped up to make it happen this year and all previous years. So that's a lot of the stuff that's been happening. And also in the background, Katie's been working hard. It was Katie who did all this. And when you have a chance, thank her very much. You also got the Christmas cards out for you. Because we want to have a socially distant parade and tree lighting, we're actually asking for the street closure so we can separate people out. So that one is before you. And then there's going to be further briefing notes about the Christmas light contest, which council judges every year, where you approve the prizes. You also choose who's going to judge it. And then I don't know if you want to incorporate anything around the new Christmas park as well. If you want to expand your tree lighting stuff to include that or not. But anyways, Christmas is busy. A lot is happening, and yeah, I love Christmas.
It's a good way to end. It's fantastic. This was still discussion. Yeah, you got it all out there at once, which is fantastic. To say to comments of folks that I saw over the weekend as well, I think it's a load of hooey, to be polite. That I doubt that there is a municipality that does as much as Fort Smith does surrounding Christmas, and I think it is ridiculous, questionable, and if not insulting, how much that the town has had to take on and been expected to take on. Whether it's funding the lights from the Power Corporation, taking over more and more and more and more and more and more and more events to make sure that Christmas happens. I think it's a terrible precedence that has only gotten worse, and it's admirable and amazing that the town has done as much as it does to maintain the flame that is Christmas and how great it has to be. But these are things that are often run by chambers, by block groups, by neighborhoods, by volunteers, by churches, by people who just want it to happen. You know, just like Christmas isn't something you can buy at the store. It's not something you make your town make happen for you. It's a community of volunteers. It should be a community of volunteers that makes it happen. And to everybody who decides that to be an armchair Facebooker, commenter, should maybe get off their duff and volunteer to help make Christmas better in the community. So, with that, that's not trying to be the opposite of bah humbug so much as it's just that it's not one of those things that just, being an angry contributor on Facebook is just ignorant and arrogant to the fact that 30 years you can run a Christmas sleigh in the community with predominantly run by volunteers and funded largely by donations from the town of Fort Smith and volunteers is just ill-informed and at best scapegoating for fun on Facebook. And I'm tired of it. So.
Your rant for this year?
I don't know. Yeah. It's been, yeah. So with that, all those in favor of the recommendation for the road closure? Carried. Thank you.
Favorite.
Next, we have a recommendation for the Christmas tree lights contest. Councillor Cox.
I move that council approves the Christmas lights contest with prizes of $250 for first place, $150 for second place, and $100 for third place, and that prize money be paid from the council miscellaneous budget.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Prissinger. Discussion? All those in favor?
Favor.
Thank you. Carried unanimously. Next, we have a half day, December 24th, half day. Can I have somebody move the recommendation? Councillor Campbell.
I move that the town staff dependent on operational needs be given a half day off on December 24th, 2020. Should operational requirements necessitate employment on this noted day, the employee will be given equivalent time off in lieu at a mutually agreed time.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Cox. Discussion? Fair enough. All those in favor? Carried. And Councillor MacArthur and Deputy Mayor Smith?
Oh, favor, yeah.
Favor, definitely.
Thank you. Carried unanimously. Excusing of council members for this evening.
No, one more.
Sorry, we had item E. My mistake. Administration, you had requested item other business E.
Thank you. I think the letter speaks for itself. Councillor Campbell, his appointment on the Board of Directors expired December 9th of the Fort Smith Housing Authority. They're requesting that the town put forward a person to replace him, unless perhaps Mr. Campbell wishes to let his name stand. I'm not sure how the process works here.
Councillor Corbett.
Thank you. I move that Councillor Campbell be reappointed to the Fort Smith Housing Authority Board for a period stated.
Councillor Cox, you're seconding. Discussion. I guess you're accepting. Yeah. Right. All those in favor of the recommendation? Carrie. Oh, sorry. Councillor MacArthur and Deputy Mayor Smith.
Favor? Yeah.
Thank you. Carried unanimously. Congratulations. It's like Hotel California. Next is the excusing of councillors. I have somebody move the excusing of councillors for this evening. I believe it's just the mayor this evening. Councillor Corbett.
I move that Mayor Napier be excused from the Corporate Services Standing Committee meeting of December 1st, 2020.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Pressinger. Discussion. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Date of the next meeting. Good Lord. January 5th, 2021. And with that, I need someone to move adjournment. The dog moves. Councillor Cox.
I move that the meeting be adjourned at 8:35 p.m.
Thank you. Seconded. Messenger. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Westfall. See you all next week. Bob. Kevin.
Get together and get some Christmas lights and do whatever you got to do to decorate it up. That's up to you guys to self-organize. I'm ready for that. Yeah. Okay, I actually talked to Paul because I told him to get a blade or something, or even a snowplow, because the way the guys are dragging the blade like that is starting to break our operators. They're all getting bad backs from it. So, yeah, I was gonna blade or blower. I don't know. Maybe we can get a contractor to do that. But that's tough. I might get pushed back on that one. But yeah, see what happens. Oh, we don't have a blower? Oh, yes. I don't know. Exactly. No, fair enough. You can't drag the blade on the gravel, so we have to hire a contractor. Because we're not sure. Okay. Oh, look into it. And it'll be fine. It'll hopefully, if I get the money, it's gonna get paid next summer. Yeah, I know. But